In 2004, Zack Snyder releases a movie called Dawn of the Dead, a remake of 1978's Dawn of the Dead. The film features elements from the original film like zombies, a group of survivors that hole up in a mall, heck, even Tom Savini shows up in both films. Outside of those elements, and perhaps a small number of others that I failed to mention, the two films share almost nothing in common, featuring entirely new characters, more characters, a different story altogether, and a wildly different ending. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a very long time. In fact, look very closely at the title. You see, I'd been meaning to follow up my Resident Evil 3 video with an explanation for what a remake truly is, and this is mainly because I constantly get comments from people that don't understand what a remake is. And that's really through no fault of their own. People who make these media properties don't know what a remake is either, with most of them describing their own projects or those of other creators as remakes when they are probably better described as a remaster, but more on that later. I am also guilty of mislabeling the two here and there, and if we're being honest, it's because of the muddiness surrounding these terms and how they are used colloquially. Frustratingly, when attempting to talk about games like Resident Evil 3, this muddiness allows people to get away with criticizing something for not being the same as something else. So today, let's talk about remakes and what it takes for something to actually be one. The most logical place to start is by defining the word remake. Now, in my view, I don't really think this should be necessary because the definition is in the name itself: to remake something. However, this presents a comprehension problem. Some people think to remake something is to do everything exactly the same as a previous iteration, a context that would give the word remake the definition of redo, itself presenting a comprehension issue, as can be seen in its definition. So let's take a look at Merriam-Webster's definition of the word remake. And boom, there it is. A remake is something that was made in a different form. The key word there is different. And if you need a different dictionary, fortunately the Oxford Dictionary says the same thing. Remakes are inherently different than the original thing because, by definition, that's what a remake is. Something different. So then, what the heck is a remaster? Well, put simply, a remaster is the original source code, but with a shiny new coat of paint or enhanced in some fashion. The word remaster comes from the music industry, where you'd create a new master of a song so that you'd have an enhanced copy of that song. In general, the original master or a copy of that master would be used to make this new enhanced copy of a song. However, the song would never change. It would still be the same artist on the recording with the same instrumentation. This is why the definition of remaster specifically refers to the music industry, because it's most easily understood in this context. My favorite action film ever, The Raid, perfectly demonstrates what a remaster is. As you can see here, the Blu-ray version of the film has a bluish tone to it, but in the enhanced remastered version, that bluish hue is gone and the film looks significantly better. The Matrix also demonstrates this concept. In the theatrical release, the film had a green filter over everything, but in the 4K remastered version of the film, things look far more natural and true to life. There's a reason I'm showing you film examples here, and that's because they neatly demonstrate the point I'm trying to make. Did you notice how in both the original and remastered versions of these films, the scenes are exactly the same and the story or the actors didn't change? This is the difference in the words remake and remaster, and why using them interchangeably is inherently dangerous to media discourse. Resident Evil 3 Remake was one of the casualties of this concept. I learned this the hard way when I made a video about certain criticisms of that game, something I'm still dealing with to this day. Certain people were unaware that I was addressing specific criticisms in that video and attacked my position, claiming that I wasn't addressing their specific criticism, the main one being so-called cut content. If you're unaware, since 2002, Capcom has been releasing remakes of the mainline Resident Evil games, starting with Resident Evil 1 and, as of 2024, up to Resident Evil 4. The first two were critically acclaimed and loved by the general audience, but the third was largely panned by the loud minority on the internet. The critiques varied from anger at the decision to no longer use Julia Voth as the model for Jill Valentine after 18 years to being short in length, something I addressed in my video. But one thing I did not address in my video was the cut content critique, and there was very good reason for this. It's a dumb criticism, one that I didn't think I needed to address. As I explained a few minutes ago, a remake means to make something differently. This means in a discussion about a video game remake, cut content doesn't even make sense in this context. For something to have been cut, it would have to have existed in the new property in the first place. Since we are making something anew, an idea from a previous iteration not being present by definition makes that something a remake. So I didn't address this in my video because I stupidly assumed people understood what a remake was. Apparently not. It seems that people were expecting a remaster for Resident Evil 3, and frankly, I would too. That game is rough in 2024.
So Jill, did you decide to help us out? It looks like we're the only ones who survived. We should work together.
No, we can't trust her.
Why?
Instead, we got a remake, or a different take on that story, with quite a few elements changed from the original.
Hey, Captain. This fine young lady could use our help.
Carlos, you didn't even think to ask fine young lady her name? She is an elite operative of RPD, Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Her name is something Valentine.
It's Jill.
And while I can empathize with people lamenting the live selections no longer being a part of the experience or changing the clock tower encounter into an arena-style boss fight, what I dislike is people not understanding that these changes are what make the game a remake in the first place. It still tells the same general story, but elements from the original were either reworked, made more linear, or expanded. Personally, I don't think the game gets enough credit for its incredible expansion of the hospital. It's easily the best location in the game with the best atmosphere. I also dislike people not giving the game credit for its expansions and improvements of characters from the original game. Brad, for example, is given more characterization and made into a tragic hero archetype that is integrated into the plot better. Due to Brad's expansion, by extension, Marvin becomes a better character than his original appearance in Resident Evil 2, as we learn what happens to Marvin before he meets Leon and why he's so stern with Leon in the remake.
Come on, man. Not you too. Sorry. Sorry.
Three hours later.
This is good news. We can get you to a hospital.
No, I am not the priority here.
Lieutenant, I'm not just gonna leave you here.
I'm giving you an order, rookie. You save yourself first. I'd come with you, but I'd just slow you down. Now, you'll need this.
I can't take him.
Stop. And don't make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. You take it out, or you run. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Carlos is without question a better character than his 90s counterpart, and his role in the story is expanded further. All of these elements make the game a textbook example of a remake. So now that we got a correctly labeled game out of the way, let's talk about incorrectly labeled games. Putting aside the fact that Naughty Dog is just as bad as Rockstar with trying to get you to double and even triple dip on old PS3 games, this is not a remake. This is blatantly a remaster. The scenes are exactly the same, the story is exactly the same, and you could play either version and come away with the same exact experience. The difference is the level of fidelity, and as we discussed earlier with my movie examples, all this game has is a fresh coat of paint. And yes, I am aware there are other enhancements, such as accessibility controls and audio, but they are enhancements and not outright changes. For example, in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, Jill traverses the Raccoon City Police Department, a location made famous in Resident Evil 2. In the remake, Carlos is the one that goes back to the RPD, and he even encounters an enemy that never appeared in the original Resident Evil 3, a licker. This shows a deliberate attempt by the developers to make something different than the original game and not a soulless cash grab like The Last of Us Part 1. This brings us to an interesting wrinkle in this whole discussion. Resident Evil 1 Remake, strangely enough. This game is generally faithful to the original game, although the story does venture very wildly into different territory with the addition of the Lisa Trevor story and the fate of Barry Burton. Most people try to label this game a shot-for-shot remake, which is problematic for a variety of reasons, and this game is one of the culprits that started the mislabeling of remastered games as remakes and vice versa. The existence of this game is admittedly a gray area, one that is not so easily defined, especially due to the subsequent games in the series being more radical in their changes. In general, this game follows the definition of a remake due to the aforementioned Lisa Trevor storyline being added to its lore, but it also straddles the fence with elements reminiscent of remasters. I mean, listen to the audio from the original game and listen to the remake. As you can see, this game is far more remaster than, say, Resident Evil 2 Remake, but it's still a remake because it has different level layouts, different enemies, and additions to its lore that changes the outcome of its story. I would also argue that Dead Space Remake is more of a remaster than a remake, as the game is fundamentally the same experience as the original, but with enhancements such as a mostly contiguous ship, better graphics and controls, a vastly improved zero-gravity system, and certain weapons being tweaked or outright changed. But even then, that game has some changes to its story, so it also overlaps the remake-remaster dichotomy that probably needs a new category at this point. Funnily enough, most gamers prefer this style of remake, one that gives them basically the same experience as the original game, but with tweaks here and there, hence the response to Resident Evil 3. And at the risk of this video aging poorly, the Silent Hill 2 remake seems to be following the same path as Resident Evil 1 remake. The character models are strikingly similar to the original game, and even though it looks fine in the gameplay trailer, it does have a somewhat dated look to it that makes it feel more like a remaster with enhanced gameplay. And all that's going to do is make this discussion even muddier. Anyway, this has been your friendly neighborhood Birdman, and I just gave you something to talk about.